This video will start looking at basic substitutions. In this video we will be concentrating on tritone substitutions. Chord substitutions, or chord subs, are commonplace in most jazz music. They're used to enhance or decorate standard chord sequences, giving them more flavour. They're often used on older tunes to help them sound more contemporary. The tritone substitution, or tritone sub, or flat 5 sub, is one of the most common in jazz. Its normal function is as a dominant chord replacement. First, you start with a dominant chord. In this example, we're using C7, the dominant of F. Then, you remove the fifth to leave the root and the guide tones, which as we remember now are the third and the seventh. And now you move the root up 3 whole tones and revoice the chord. We know from the last video that guide tones give us the most important information of every chord. The guide tones in a dominant chord resolve to the root. As you can see here, the flat 7 in C7 resolves to the third in F major, and the third in C7 resolves to the root in F major. So you have a very strong sound. This sound is very strong in harmony, especially diatonic harmony, giving us tension and release. The guide tones are common to both the original root note and the subbed root note, and therefore both the chords. So for instance, C and F sharp share E and B flat or A sharp within their 4-note chord tones. But the guide tone switch function, as you can see in F sharp, A sharp is the third. In C7, B flat, which is the same as A sharp, is the seventh, and likewise with the E in both chords. The guide tone switch functions but retain the voice leading which resolves to one or root chord. Using this principle, you can then insert a tritone stub into a conventional 2-5 or 2-7, 5-7, 1 major 7. Here's a 2, 5, 1 in C with guide tones. Now, with a tritone sub. You'll find this method is used repeatedly in jazz standards. One of the most famous examples is in the first 8 bars of Girl from Ipanema. Have a look at the chords in bars 4 to 9. In bars 6 and 8, we have tritone subs. A big clue is that there's a chromatic descent in the bass. You can see, especially in bar 6, the G flat 7 is a tritone sub of the dominant C7 in F. Here's another tune by the same composer, Jobim, who's one of the greatest bossa nova songwriters ever. Have a look at bar 4, the chord B7. It's another tritone sub. It's the tritone sub of F7, and F7 is the 5-7 in B flat major 7. If we wanted to add a Roman numeral analysis to a tritone sub, we simply call this chord sub 5-7. This tells us that it's functioning as a 5-7 chord in the home key, or the identified key center, but has been substituted. Let's look at a variation on this. The tritone substituted dominant can be approached by its 2 chord. For instance, we can label the C sharp minor before the F sharp 7 tritone subchord sub 2 minor 7 for consistency. Theoretically, you can't sub a 2 chord using a tritone sub, or a 2 minor 7 chord using a tritone sub, as it doesn't share the same guide tones. But it does help us to look at it like this for ease of analysis. Note the relationship between the 2 minor 7 chord and the dominant chord. C sharp minor 7 and F sharp 7, dominant movement. We could be even clearer when showing analysis by indicating tonal centers like this. As you can see, the tritone sub is labelled as TTS, or tritone sub, so we're clear what type of sub has taken place or been inserted. There's a bracket over the top that shows us it's all in F major. As you now know, the cycle of fourths is a very useful tool for jazz theory. We can even use it for tritone subs. Remember the 2-5-1 motion on the cycle? Well, you can get a tritone sub for the dominant by looking at the chord directly opposite. This works obviously throughout the cycle. Whilst it's not a rule, it's often good practice to use a sharp 11 on a tritone sub when spelling it, e.g. C7 sharp 11. This is known as a Lydian dominant. We'll look at these in more depth in another video. Let's look at the 5-7 and its tritone sub spelt as a Lydian dominant. This is how it works. The root in the dominant, or the 5-7, becomes the 11, or the sharp 11, in the tritone sub. On many occasions, using a Lydian dominant when putting in a tritone substitution means you avoid a clash with the melody note. We'll also look at this concept in more depth in another video. In the next video, we'll continue our exploration of substitutions and look at secondary dominants.